Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Charlie. Charlie's story starts back in 1968 when they were found in the attic of an old Victorian home that resides in upstate New York. An old attic of a Victorian home seems like a perfect place to find a cursed doll, and it definitely seems as though that's what happened. Charlie was found inside of a locked trunk, and inside of that trunk, aside from the doll, there were also some newspapers dating back to the 30s, as well as a yellowed piece of paper that had the Lord's Prayer scribbled on it. With all that I've learned about cursed items in my time here on Most Amazing, I personally would have locked the trunk back up and called Ed and Lorraine Warren, but this family, they did not do that. They did quite the opposite. Instead, they placed the doll on display with some of the others that they had, and this is where the trouble began. Soon, Charlie started moving, all on their own. The family would return to find that the doll had somehow swapped places with some of the other dolls around. Shortly after this, one member of the family began to claim that they could hear Charlie speaking to them at night. The parents, unfortunately, didn't listen and chalked this story up to an active imagination, but the other members of the family were terrified of Charlie and refused to go near. Soon, things would take an escalation when a family member began to find mysterious and serious scratches on their body, and this is when the family collectively decided that something needed to be done. They locked Charlie back up in the trunk, and now Charlie resides at the local Artisan, which is said to be an oddity shop that sits in Beverly, Massachusetts, just minutes away from the haunting town of Salem. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Shrine Barbie. Barbie isn't always sunshines and smiles. Sometimes apparently there might be something more sinister going on. On a Singaporean island, there is a shrine dedicated to someone who passed away after falling from a cliff in 1914. It is said that the person who passed was a German, and at the time of their passing, they were stuck on this island when their family began being investigated by the British Army. Despite the years it's been since her death, this Barbie was actually only placed at the shrine in 2007. This all happened because a local man claimed that the German girl had requested the doll to be placed at the shrine after appearing to him in a dream for 3 nights in a row. It is this story that has people believing that this doll might have a lot more going on than what meets the eye. In our number 8 spot today, we have Lily. Lily was initially delivered to a paranormal research organization with a note from the owner that read, quote, "I found her outside my door one morning with a note that said to not put her by mirrors or in the same room I sleep in. I gave her a flashlight so she could drain the batteries, but instead she made my lights flicker at night. My cat would not go near her and my dog would just stare. At times I would be woken up from a dead sleep smelling burnt toast or sometimes a sweet fruity smell. Her favorite color is red. That is all I know." Okay. That's terrifying, but it seems like the doll was in the right spot. The doll quickly started to give off major paranormal vibes. As it turns out, this group was able to trace back some of the origins of Lily, and it totally makes sense as to why she would be a haunted doll. Apparently she can be traced back all the way to the early 1600s, which is a time when figurines like Lily were left out to scare off local spirits and New World ghosts. This custom can be dated all the way back to Vikings and ancient Rome, and it seems as though Lily and her powers didn't just work, but maybe caught some kind of entity on the way. In our number 7 spot today, we have Annabelle. Alright, what is a list of haunted dolls without the haunted doll? Annabelle. It's not just a movie, there really is a very real doll that the tales have been inspired by. The doll now resides inside of the Warrens Occult Museum, where it absolutely belongs, but where did it come from? Well, there was a college student named Donna who received this doll as a gift from her mother, who had purchased it from an antique store. Donna and her roommate started to notice some pretty creepy things happening and swore that the doll was moving. They said it would appear in different places and positions throughout their apartment before things began to get worse. Donna began to find notes that said help in her apartment, and one night found the doll in a different position and covered in some sort of red substance. The girls then decided to contact a medium who solidified all of their beliefs and told them that the doll had been possessed by the spirit of someone who was killed in their apartment building. For some reason, the girls didn't immediately get rid of the doll, and the story goes that their friend Lou, who was at the girls' apartment, heard a strange noise one night and went to investigate, and he was then attacked and killed by Annabelle. The girls finally contacted a priest who told them that the doll was possessed by a demon straight from hell, and then put them in contact with, you guessed it, Ed and Lorraine. Jane, who are the paranormal investigators. They tried to do an exorcism on the doll, but it apparently failed, which is why it now is kept in a glass box at their museum. In our number 6 spot today we have Ruby. Ruby, like many of these other cursed dolls, just couldn't seem to sit still. This doll always found itself moving around the house, and the owners would find her in different rooms than they had left her, which definitely is what led to them catching on to her haunted nature. This was only exacerbated by the fact that anyone who picked Ruby up was suddenly plagued by feelings of extreme sadness as well as nausea. After a little digging, the family was able to find that Ruby had quite a dark history that might help to explain these strange happenings. According to the former owners of Ruby, she was actually passed down in the family from generation to generation. Apparently though, when you trace back to the time that the doll entered the family in the first place, shortly after a member of the family passed away while holding the doll, and now it is believed that their spirit resides inside. Of course, the haunted doll spent a few years bouncing around between family members, but now it has found its home base, and that is in the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult. Those who have seen the doll in person have reported that around it, they've often felt an overwhelming feeling of sorrow, and it is all said to be coming straight from the doll. In our number 5 spot today we have Okikyu. Visitors to a specific temple in Hokkaido, Japan are welcome to gaze and look at Okikyu, but any photography is strictly prohibited. Legend goes that this doll was originally purchased in 1918 by a man who was giving it to his sister. When the doll was first purchased, it had short hair. Seems like a bit of a mundane point, but I swear it's important. Sadly, a year after receiving the doll, the sister would tragically pass away, and mysteriously after this, Okikyu the doll's hair would seem to grow, which of course should be impossible. The family ended up moving away in 1938, and before doing so, they gave the doll to the monks at the temple. Since then, it is said that the doll's hair has been continuously growing and now sits at a length to her knees. Some even claim that close inspection of the doll's mouth shows teeth that appear to be erupting from the gums. Whatever is happening here, it definitely isn't normal. In our number 4 spot today we have Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll was a childhood birthday gift from a grandfather to his grandson, who was also named Robert, but more often went by Gene. The story claims that while growing up with Robert, Gene would often be heard by his parents in his bedroom having conversations with himself in 2 entirely different voices. His parents would sometimes be woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of Gene screaming, only to find him completely frightened in bed with overturned furniture all around him. Gene would blame Robert for all of the strange happenings, and at the time, no one really believed him. Gene kept Robert into adulthood, and it became what people would describe as an unhealthy relationship. Apparently, Gene took Robert everywhere with him and spoke as if he was a living entity rather than a doll. Okay, so this story is already not great, but it gets worse. Gene lived in a house as an adult that was called the artist's house. Robert would be left in the upstairs window where children in the area reported seeing the doll disappear and reappear, and they all chose to stay clear of the house. After Gene passed away in 1974, a woman named Myrtle purchased the house, and apparently Robert as well. Visitors of the house could swear they could hear footsteps and giggling coming from the attic where Robert was, and some even claimed to see the doll's expression change if someone spoke poorly of Gene. Myrtle reported Robert moving around the house on his own, and after 20 years she decided that she had had enough and donated him to a museum. Robert still lives in the museum where he is safely locked up, but it is said that he still likes to place a little curse on those who take his photo without permission. The walls of the museum near Robert's glass case are riddled with notes from previous visitors and naysayers who are begging Robert for his forgiveness and asking him to remove any curse he had placed on them. In our number 3 spot today we have Chuck Esme. Alright, it's my favorite on this list. I've talked about Chuck Esme before, and I swear I will every time I get a chance because I love this story. It's so funny and pretty terrifying as well. Twilight fans everywhere will remember the infamous character of Renesmee, the child of human Bella and vampire Edward, and we will also all remember the very questionable CGI that was used in the movies. I mean, How could we possibly forget it? But it turns out the CGI wasn't the only cursed part of Renesmee's character. For much of the movie filming, an animatronic doll was used in place of a real infant. This prop, however, is now being accused of being possessed by some malevolent spirit. The doll resides in the Forever Twilight display at the Chamber of Commerce in Forks, Washington, where the movie is set. According to those who work at the exhibit, as well as visitors, the doll is now referred to as Chuckesme, a reference to the Chucky movies, because of the strange happenings around the Twilight prop. According to one of the people who works in the building, quote, "One day she might be standing up straight, and the next, when you come in on another day, she's in a weird position." She went on to say, quote, "It's like, is she moving around in there? We don't know, but we tell everyone that the display case cover is on her for their protection." In our number 2 spot today we have the Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is basically exactly what it sounds like, and while it is exceptionally creepy to look at, the story behind it is even more disturbing. This island sits in the canals south of Mexico City, and it is the home of many, many absolutely frightening and mutilated dolls. Even in the daylight, these dolls look creepy with their missing limbs and heads and creepy beady eyes, but at nighttime, the island is absolute nightmare fuel. The story behind this island is quite tragic. It starts off with the only person on the island, Don Julian Santana, finding a body. He was of course absolutely beside himself over this gruesome discovery, and shortly after he saw a doll floating by in the water. He strung the doll up in a tree in order to appease her soul and to protect the island from evil. While this is an extremely dark story and the dolls are very creepy, the story only gets more eerie and more paranormal feeling. The Island of Dolls is of course only accessible by boat, but despite its isolation, many people come to visit the haunting island, and in return, there have been many reports of these tourists hearing some sort of whispering coming from the dolls. Tourists are also encouraged to bring and leave some sort of offering or another doll to add to the collection, so who knows what cursed items are being left behind in the hopes of these people ridding them from their own life. In our number 1 spot today we have the Nightmare Doll. Haunted dolls like Annabelle and even Robert get a lot of hype, but they certainly aren't the only dolls with stories of curses and hauntings behind them. This Nightmare Doll was listed for sale on eBay, and according to the seller, the doll is possessed by a Divuk, which is a malicious demon or entity. The seller of the doll is actually someone who apparently specializes in selling these sorts of paranormal items that no one wants anymore. The seller explained that the owner of the doll bought it at an antique shop, and while they did tell her about what the doll held, she didn't know what the word meant, so she took it anyway. Soon after purchasing it, she realized that anyone who came into contact with the doll was then plagued with terrifying nightmares and occurrences of these sort of shadow people. She only could handle this all for a couple of months before she handed the doll over for it to be sold and moved far, far away from her.
Alright, coming in at number 10 we have the Doll of the Devil. This is the name being given to the creepy doll that caused a stir on the internet in 2018. Footage of a vampire doll that follows you with its eyes went viral after the demon doll appeared on an unmarked tombstone in Mexico. You know what? I don't like the sound of this. Oh, but it gets even worse. The doll was found with a baby bottle of blood next to it. I'm not even sure if this is the original video, but footage uploaded to YouTube by RM Videos shares the creepy doll, and it's had over 330,000 views. Look how its eyes really like bore into your soul. Who watching this video would touch that doll? Yeah, rather you than me, mate. Coming in at number 9, we have Mandy. Mandy is one of the more notorious haunted dolls. I'm actually pretty creeped out just looking at her, to be honest. It's all about her cracked face, her knitted bonnet, and that creepy little lamb. They're enough for me to basically want nothing to do with her, but as I'm here hosting a top 10 video, I kind of have to give you the story. Sucks to be me. Alright. So, Mandy is said to date back to the 1920s and is thought to have come from Germany. Somehow, she travelled all the way to Canada, and in 1991 she was donated to a museum in British Columbia. Why was she given to a museum? Well, her previous owner thought that she was possessed. She said she would wake up at night to hear a baby crying, and that the windows in her home would miraculously open. After she gave away the doll, the crying and the window opening stopped, but strange things started happening in the museum. Workers also heard crying, and weirdly some staff members would find their lunch had disappeared. I'm sorry, but like, ain't nobody messing with my lunch. In one truly terrifying turn of events, that little toy lamb was found outside of Mandy's case. How'd it get there? Well, paranormal investigators say that Mandy is possessed by the spirit of a child, but she isn't actually a menace, just playful. Nonetheless, I think I would keep my hands off her. Coming in at number 8, we have the wedding scratcher. Like, I already don't feel super great about a porcelain doll dressed as a bride. It kind of combines all of my fears of corpse brides, Miss Havisham, and spooky haunted dolls, making it a bit of a trio of doom. Speaking of doom, this bride doll bought it in bounds for a family who bought the doll for £5 in a charity shop in the United Kingdom. 50-year-old Debbie Merrick brought the China doll, but then she got way more than she bargained for. It started bringing chaos and misfortune into her home. She placed the doll on display in the spare room, but since the doll moved in, her husband began waking up with scratches all over his legs. He also had started having dreams that the doll dragged him across the floor. Debbie has also been having nightmares about the doll and says that since she came to be in their home, their smoke alarm frequently goes off. In the end, she decided, you know what, I'm just putting that doll up for sale. Good riddance. Coming in at number 7, we have dead dolls. Less curse, more, well, actually dead people turned into dolls, which, I mean, really, do you want to go touching that? No. Anatoly Moskvin brought to life the Russian urban legend of a nasty corpse collector. It seemed that the 44-year-old took to grave robbing young dead girls, which he then turned into dolls. How? Well, he mummified the girls, dressed them up, and placed them around his room. Of course, this super creep of a middle-aged man still lived with his parents, and somehow his illicit activities went unnoticed by them. He managed to convince his mum and dad that he had a thing for big dolls. At this point, when your son's 44 and still living at home and gets a thing for big dolls, is it not time to stage an intervention? I think so. Moskvin would film the corpse dolls and zoom up close into their faces, apparently obsessed with his creations. Eventually, Russian police cottoned on to what he was doing and raided his home, where they found the robbed corpses of 26 females aged between 3 and 15. Disgusting. Their families must have been distraught to learn their dead children had been defiled in this way. When I die, please don't turn me into a doll. I don't want that. I don't need that. Coming in at number 6, we have this Elmo doll. I can't believe it has been almost 10 years since an Elmo doll made headlines for threatening to kill a toddler. I remember reading about it at the time. I can't believe time's flown so much. So Elmo, as many of you may know, is a Muppet puppet from Sesame Street. A while back, a bunch of Elmo dolls that could talk and say your name were released. Now 2-year-old James Bowman was the proud owner of a doll, and he enjoyed Elmo saying his name so much that he quickly ran the batteries down. When the batteries were replaced by his mum, for some reason the doll stopped just saying his name. Instead, out of nowhere, it started saying, "Kill James." Okay. The 2-year-old then even started repeating the doll, saying "Kill James," which you can imagine totally and utterly freaked his mum out. She did what all good mothers would do and tossed the evil cursed doll right on out of there, although not before footage of the creepy toy in action was recorded and distributed to the press. Have a listen.
Kill James? Kill James?
Yeah, I don't feel good about that. His mum said that she was kind of distraught and, I mean, I'll say. Coming in at number 5, we have Robert. What a classic. While I usually love a good nautical theme, I am absolutely not here for this sailor doll. Robert is a 20th century doll that used to belong to a child called Eugene Otto. Eugene used to blame many naughty things he did on Robert, and the pair would often be overheard talking, with Eugene's parents assuming Robert's voice was really Eugene. When Eugene died in 1974, Robert was left in an attic and discovered by the next owners of the home, who had a 10-year-old daughter. The small girl was terrified of Robert and claimed he wanted to kill her. Neighbours of the house would swear they saw Robert at the window on occasion, and a plumber who worked at the house found the doll to move across the room on its own. A reporter from the area, Malcolm Ross, visited the house to see Robert and was disturbed to sense that Robert was listening to his conversation, and he even thought he was understanding him. Legend has it that this doll has caused car accidents, broken bones, made people lose their jobs, get divorced, divorced, and more. Robert is now in a museum in Florida's Key West, and museum visitors supposedly experience post-visit misfortunes for failing to respect Robert. So do you know what? Maybe don't even look at Robert, let alone touch him. He does not like disrespect. Another doll you should never look at is Peggy. Peggy will make you sick, and she is coming into number 4. So Peggy is a haunted doll residing in the UK in Shrewsbury, Shropshire to be precise. Peggy is owned by paranormal investigator Jane Harris, who runs an organisation called Haunted Dolls. That's what it says on the tin. Really. She was given Peggy by a terrified woman who couldn't cope with the burden of the doll. Peggy is thought to have the power to visit people in their dreams, warning them or haunting them. Mediums who have worked with Peggy believe that she is linked to the Holocaust, and Jane believes that she died of respiratory issues, possibly a gassing. In 2015, Peggy caused a media stir when an article was published about her on the Mail Online, after which 80 readers reported having an awful experience after viewing her picture. Most were nausea, but some people even had panic attacks. Peggy is said to be haunted by an evil spirit. Now Jane, her owner, did ask the doll to stop tormenting people, but apparently one woman even had a heart attack shortly after meeting her. Yikes. Coming in at number 3, we have Victorian mourning dolls. We're lucky we're living in the age we do, as 150 years or so ago things were not so great. During the Victorian era, child mortality rates were high. As a result, the Victorians dealt with death in a pretty different way than we do now. In the late 19th century, it became habitual to have a mourning doll made and laid at the grave of a dead child. The dolls were usually made of wax, and their hair was generally made from the hair of the deceased, which is pretty creepy. The doll would also be dressed in the deceased's clothes and mourned as if they were a real child. These dolls were then often kept in a container by bereaved families. Now I'm not saying that they're necessarily cursed, but they were the physical representation of a dead child made with the child's real hair. I for one would not go touching them. Alright, less spooky in kind of a ghostly way, but very spooky in a real life do you wanna kill me way, we have Snack Time Cabbage Patch Kid at number 2. Now these were the true menaces of the 1990s. Sure, they might not be haunted or possessed by a demon, but these dolls were the real demon here. Why? Well, because they tried to eat the kids they belonged to. So the story goes that these dolls were released in 1996, and they were designed to make the doll look like they could eat. Plastic fries and various other fake foods were included, and kids could feed them and the doll would chew them. Sounds great, but unfortunately the doll couldn't tell the difference between a plastic fry and a kid's finger, and you know how much children love sticking their fingers in stuff. There were several complaints from parents of children with injured fingers. Kids would obviously stick their fingers in the doll's mouth. The doll would bite down, clamping so hard the kids couldn't always get their fingers out. There were a number of reports in the mid-90s of kids getting their fingers and other body parts stuck in the mouth of the devil dolls, and one girl even got an unwelcome haircut when the doll mulched up a significant proportion of her hair. Over 100 complaints were received, so the doll was recalled and $40 refunds were offered. To be honest, I'd rather have my finger than 40 bucks. Finally, coming into number 1, we have one of the most famous dolls of all time. Never touch her, it's Annabelle. On first viewing, I kind of thought that Annabelle, a Raggedy Ann doll, was pretty cute looking, but then when you realise that this is the doll behind the Annabelle movie franchise, all cute goes out of the window and is replaced with cold hard fear. For all her supposedly evil biddings, Annabelle is currently in a glass jail in the form of a sealed box at the Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. The museum is run by Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they received the doll after it lived with a student nurse and her roommate in the 1970s. The doll behaved strangely, so the pair contacted a medium who suggested that she was haunted by a dead girl named Annabelle Higgins. The pair felt a great deal of empathy and tried to nurture and care for the girl, but it turned out she was a malicious and evil spirit, leading to the pair giving the doll away. It's a bit less stressful than the movie makes it sound, but nonetheless I really wouldn't fancy being the bearer of this plushy menace. There is a reason she's locked behind glass, because you should never touch this smiling devil. You just don't know what she could do to you. kinda like it.
Number 10. Dybbuk box. In Jewish folklore, a dybbuk is an evil spirit. Supposedly, someone accidentally summoned the demon while using a homemade Ouija board, but managed to trap it inside the wine cabinet. The Dybbuk box came to light in 2001 when Kevin Mannis purchased it and started having terrible nightmares. He then decided to gift the cabinet to his mother, who suffered a stroke the very day she received it. Not just this, but every person who ever owned that wine cabinet has reported experiencing horrible events. The last owner of the cabinet, Jason Haxton, found out the box possesses a spirit of a malicious Jewish creature called a Dybbuk, who has the ability to haunt and possess the living. Jason not only had nightmares but also developed a strange skin disease and began coughing up blood. At that point, Jason contacted his local rabbis and sealed the Dybbuk back in the box. Jason later, wanting nothing to do with the box, gave the cabinet to Zach to display it in his museum. You actually may have heard of this box before because in 2018, fans of rapper Post Malone claimed that his spat of bad luck was caused by his contact with the cabinet. Number 9. Charles Manson's cremated ashes. Charles Manson was a criminal who created a cult called the Manson family. It was active in California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Now, the group consisted of approximately 100 followers who had lived an unconventional lifestyle and frequently used psychoactive substances. Now, the members of the cult believed that he was Jesus Christ and followed everything he did. Now, some members committed a series of 9 deaths at 4 locations in July and August of 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide for the deaths of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. When Charles Manson died, his body was cremated, and some of his followers actually took fragments of his ashes to keep as a memento. This led to such creations as the Ryan Almighty blood paintings of Manson, in which the eyes were filled in with Charles's own cremains. Painted in Ryan's own blood, the artistry has to be appreciated, but the morbidness of the painting with the cremated ashes included makes for a unique piece, to say the least. This very painting is on display at the museum along with other Charles Manson memorabilia, including a prison-worn outfit, Manson's own TV, and even more ashes in a display case along with Manson's dentures. Number 8. Love Ranch bed. Zach acquired the bed and bedroom furniture of Bunny Ranch and Love Ranch owner Dennis Hoff, which eerily includes the mattress Dennis died on. Dennis died in that room of a heart attack on October 16, 2018. He was 72 years old. Now, this just so happens to be the same mattress Lamar Odom was on when he overdosed 3 years prior in October 2015. Safe to say, a lot of bad things have happened on that mattress. Zach says they never swapped out the mattress in the Love Ranch room, and now folks at the legal Nevada brothel believe it's cursed. Zach said that he was told that the bed was cursed, so of course he wanted to add it to his collection. Number 7. Dr. Jack Kevorkian's van. Jack Kevorkian publicly championed a terminal patient's right to die by physician-assisted suicide, embodied in his quote, "Dying is not a crime." It said that he assisted at least 130 patients in ending their lives. For this, he was convicted of homicide in 1999 and was often portrayed in the media with the name of Dr. Death. Jack, who died in 2011, lived out of a van for periods of his life and used it to carry out some of his crimes. Zach found this van and paid $32,500 for the rusty 1968 Volkswagen van, which has been parked in storage at the American Jewelry and Loan Pawn Shop on 8 Mile in Detroit. Now it sits at his museum for all to see. Number 6. Demon House Staircase. From a very intriguing standalone documentary of the same name, the Demon House was an investigation undertaken by Zach and the team at a home in Indiana, where the family claimed that numerous members of the family had been possessed by a spirit. The local police department and even social services within the local area were convinced that the house was some way haunted. From footsteps in the corridor to full-on body possession, the Demon House creeped Zach and the team out more than anything we've witnessed on the show before. Now, Zach actually purchased the home for himself for investigations back in 2014 and used it to film the documentary before bulldozing it entirely in 2016, taking pieces of it, including the staircase, back to the haunted museum. Number 5. The house itself. The mansion housing the museum has reportedly been haunted for years. It was built in 1938 and owned by businessman Cyril S. Wenger, and rumor has it dark rituals took place in the basement in the 1970s. There was a pentagram found in the basement, and this is where supposedly a young boy was sacrificed. It is some kind of satanic altar supposedly to invoke the spirits down there, and it's an extremely evil place in the house. During the tour, they try to usher people through
through the basement as quickly as possible because it's so scary. Now, the mansion at one point was turned into a law firm where strange occurrences continued before the place was purchased by Zach and was eventually converted into Zach Bagans' The Haunted Museum. Number 4. Bela Lugosi Mirror. Hollywood star and Dracula actor Bela Lugosi is one of the world's most famous horror actors, but did you know that he once owned a mirror believed to be haunted? It is reported that he was obsessed with practicing a form of clairvoyance, which would involve him staring into inanimate objects to try and conjure messages from spirits. One such object reportedly used by the actor for such practice was a mirror, which hung in Bela's Hollywood Hills home. Zach was given the mirror by the niece of lawyer and B-movie producer Frank Saltry, who formerly lived in the home once owned by Bela. However, Frank tragically died at the home in 1982, and following his death, the producer's family inherited the mirror. Soon after bringing the mirror home though, the family began to notice that paranormal activity began to occur in their own home. Believing Bela's own practices and her uncle's death to have affected the mirror, she later took the object to paranormal investigator Zach. After taking the mirror from Frank's niece, the star also encountered his own paranormal experiences around the mirror when he investigated his own museum for a 2017 episode of Ghost Adventures. This included seeing a ball of light that appeared on the opposite wall of the mirror, which Zach said traveled across the room and went inside the mirror. Now that sounds extremely haunted to me. Number 3. Ed Gein Cauldron. Ed Gein ended the lives of people and was a grave robber. He created costumes, furniture, and other keepsakes from the bodies of his victims. A police raid on his house turned up masks literally made from human faces, a belt of nipples, and a corset created from a skinned torso. To be clear, he never wore these costumes when ending people's lives. Instead, he donned them in the privacy of his home. Now, some masks appeared to be mummified, almost dried out, while others were more carefully preserved. A few had lipstick applied and looked more lifelike, and 4 had been stuffed with paper and hung on the wall of his bedroom, almost like hunting trophies. Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, and Norman Bates were all based on Ed. Zach paid $2,800 at an auction to take possession of the 25-gallon cauldron Ed used to discard his victims' entrails when he gutted them. The thing had been sitting in a Wisconsin woman's home, used as a flower pot ever since Ed's 1984 death in prison. When she died, her son wisely believed the cauldron was cursed and wanted it gone, so now it's Zach's. Number 2. Peggy the Doll. Warning, looking into this doll's eyes can cause you to have health issues or even get haunted. Please watch at your own risk. Now, Peggy the Doll is a 3-foot tall doll that has a blonde hair bob with glassy blue eyes and is considered to be the most haunted and dangerous doll in the world. After being purchased at a car boot sale, the owner began having nightmares and felt as though she was being haunted by the doll. She contacted Jane Harris, a paranormal and haunted doll investigator, and eventually sent the doll to her. Jane and her team of psychics began working with the doll, running experiments, or having paranormal sessions with it, and began posting photos and videos of the doll online. That is when she began to receive comments from people who had seen the video, and immediately after viewing began to have chest pain, nausea, and or crippling headaches. So yes, she can haunt you through a screen. Jane has come to the conclusion that the doll is possessed by the spirit of a woman who was born in 1946 who died of a chest-related condition like asthma. Now, Peggy's picture alone is said to cause anxiety, heart attacks, and headaches. Now, Peggy is treated with extreme respect in the museum. She has her own room and a spirit box which is linked up to the room so guests can interact with her if they wish. Many guests have received very strange feedback through the spirit box, including being called out by name and conscious replies to certain questions asked on her guided tours. Now, looking up information about Peggy was absolutely terrifying, and Peggy, if I accidentally looked into your eyes, I am so sorry. And coming in at number 1 is the Devil's Chair. Ed and Lorraine Warren helped exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Now, Zach purchased the chair to be on display in his museum, but he had been forced to shut down his haunted rocking chair exhibit. Why? Well, Zach and his friend noticed the door to the chair's room slowly creaked open all by itself. Zach also says a light focused on the chair went out when a power cord was mysteriously yanked out of the wall. 2 hours later, he said a woman collapsed, began bawling, and asked, "What is happening to me?" Shortly thereafter, she fell unconscious, according to Zach, who adds that the woman was upstairs directly above the rocking chair exhibit. Later, Zach said 5 of his tour guides throughout the museum started crying uncontrollably. After just a few tours on opening night, the stress was too much for Zach and it forced him to shut it down altogether for the night. For now, Zach says the haunted rocking chair exhibit is closed until further notice, but in the middle of 2022, YouTubers Sam and Colby, who are paranormal investigators that I love, by the way, were given special permission to not only see or touch the chair, but to sit on it. The results were insane, and let me just say they are braver than me, because wow.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Anna Baker's wedding dress. In 1836, a man named Elias Baker purchased a mansion in Altoona, Pennsylvania and moved his small family in. Elias's oldest daughter was named Anna, and when she fell in love with a steel worker, things took a dark turn. Anna's father didn't want her dating this man, but she kept doing it in secret. The story goes that Anna and the man planned a secret wedding and were going to elope. Unfortunately, Elias found out and freaked out. He apparently purchased the steel mill that the man worked for and then forced him to have to move to an entirely different city so as to prevent him from being able to continue seeing Anna. Anna, of course, was furious with her father, and I'm sure this was only made worse by his decision to offer other men to her, to which she of course declined because that's just weird. Anna instead locked herself in a room with her wedding dress that she never got to wear. Anna unfortunately never married after that and spent the rest of her life being terribly upset about the whole incident. After her death, it is said that her anger and despair ended up going into the wedding dress. Members of the Baker family reported seeing the dress in different places around the house, despite no one moving it themselves. Some have even reported seeing Anna's spirit dressed in the gown around the house as well. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Golden Eagle. This car was a 1964 Dodge 330 limited edition, and it has been blamed for the death of around 14 people, which, like, how do we even let it get that out of control? It is said that the car started out as a police car originally, but there were 3 officers assigned to this car who all ended up taking their lives and other people's lives in horrible ways. Not in the car, but still super weird that this all seemed to happen after they had been using the cars for work. Because of this strange correlation, it ended up being sold off to another man. Throughout the 80s and 90s, it is said that because of the rumored cursed car, it became a point of interest for vandals. People began vandalizing the car only to meet their own untimely fates, which were all met in strange ways. For example, it was said that one vandal died from being struck by lightning. It is said that the curse is so strong that one person decided to merely touch the car, and it sent him into madness as he went on to commit atrocious crimes after that I cannot even detail here on YouTube. The car now belongs to Wendy Allen, who supposedly collects and decorates haunted cars for a living, so it seems as though it's finally found its home, far, far, far away from anyone else. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Blarney Stone. For hundreds of years, the Blarney Stone has resided within Blarney Castle, which is near Cork, Ireland. The stone is a piece of limestone, and legend says that those who give the stone a smooch will then be given the gift of the gab. This little smooch can bestow the power of being able to talk your way out of any situation, which would be incredibly useful, but there are those who always try to indulge in too much of a good thing. The issues start when you attempt to take a piece of the stone, no matter how small, away from its home. Those who don't follow the rules and take the stone end up being cursed with bad luck. Every year the castle receives parcels from greedy tourists who tried their luck at stealing portions of the stone. These parcels are returned with the intention of lifting the curse of misfortune. It is said that once the stone is returned, the curse will be lifted, which is most definitely good news. So I guess the moral of this curse, however, is to not be greedy and to just follow the rules. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Army was discovered in China, and it is a massive piece of funerary art that is thought to be one of the most massive archaeological finds of modern times. It truly is incredible, and it's something that's been attracting tourists from all over the world since its discovery, but for those who did the discovering, well, things haven't been going so well. In 1974, there were 7 farmers who happened to stumble upon this huge discovery, and you would think that this would come with some kind of a reward, but instead, things have been going terribly for them. Soon after the discovery, the government claimed their farmland. After this, their homes were demolished in order to make way for the exhibition halls and gift shops that were to come. They didn't just get nothing for the discovery, they ended up losing because of it. This is exactly why many people believe that perhaps with the unearthing of this huge piece of art, they also dug up some sort of curse that was buried long ago. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Myrtle's Plantation Mirror. Myrtle's Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and it is said to be one of the most haunted places in the entire world, which seems like that would make a lot of sense. One of the reasons for this spooky reputation is because of a mirror that resides inside of it. It is said that this mirror holds the spirit of Sarah Woodruff and 2 of her children. Legend goes that a woman named Chloe was a slave at the plantation, and she drew up a sort of plan to get revenge on the owners of it, Sarah and her husband. Chloe baked a cake full of poison for them, but in the end, the rest of the family, except for the husband, ended up consuming the poisonous cake. When they passed away, it is said that their spirits went into the only mirror that was uncovered at the time, thus this haunted mirror was born. People who have since visited the plantation have claimed to see the family in the reflection, as well as handprints on the glass, despite the continuous polishing. In our number 5 spot today, we have tap shoes. These tap shoes were listed on eBay, and they are cute as can be. They're black shiny ones with a red bow to tie them together. They look recital ready, but apparently they haven't been used in a long time, and the reason behind it all is chilling. Legend goes that these shoes once belonged to a little girl who loved to dance. At some point, the shoes were retired, and she would go on to meet an untimely fate. The shoes ended up being placed with other old memento items and put in a closet and sort of forgotten about. The shoes, as well as the other items with it, ended up being part of an estate sale years later, but the spirit of the person who passed may have already had some other ideas about what they wanted to happen to the shoes. The seller of the shoes reported that there were mysterious happenings surrounding the shoes as they were clearing out their late aunt's house, the person who was the owner of the shoes. They explained that there were mysterious knocking sounds coming from inside of the closet, almost as if the shoes were tapping by themselves. Also, as it turns out, the house had quite a gruesome history that included killings, so if not the aunt's ghost, perhaps there's another one lurking somewhere in there. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Dark Mirror. This mirror now resides with the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and the Occult, but prior to that, this mirror was received from the owner who had purchased it from a psychic fair. It is believed that this mirror was created sometime around the 1820s or 30s, and it is actually quite beautiful to look at, despite the sinister things it seems to hold. The owner who gave it to the museum explained that every time they peered into the mirror, they saw these extremely upsetting things while looking into the dark mirror's reflection. The museum has said that since they added the mirror to their collection, there have been guests who have also reported the same kind of things. Guests have claimed to see things reflected back at them, like sightings of their own corpse. In our number 3 spot today, we have the water jug. Okay, estate sales are weird places. There are weird things there, some quirky items, but this has got to be one of the strangest on a whole bunch of different levels. It's a decorative drinking jug, but it's being held in a miniature cart that's being pulled by a porcelain donkey. I truly could not make that item up, nor could I make up the fact that this kitschy item is also apparently haunted. The seller of this item spoke about how he grew up with the item around, as it was always displayed at his grandmother's house and that she always kept it full of water. This was all fine and dandy until after she passed away and he was taking care of the estate and he bumped into it. How was this jug filled with water when no one was there to fill it? He thought that perhaps it was just old leftover water and he just ignored it, but the same thing seemed to happen repeatedly. And it wasn't even like the water level was staying the same. It would increase, seemingly all on its own. The seller decided that this was not an item that they wanted to hold on to and decided it would be best to pass on to someone who is ready to take on this mysterious, strange object. In our number 2 spot today, we have Letta the doll. Before we really dive into this one, can we just acknowledge how all cursed dolls look like they would be a cursed doll? I mean, like Annabelle, Robert, they both totally look like dolls that would be holding a secret, scary curse. And this doll, Letta, is just another one that we can add to that list. Letta is a doll that is said to be around 200 years old and is extremely cursed. This doll is called Letta for short, as its full name is Letta Me Out. really clever. The doll was originally found underneath a house, which definitely feels like the origin story of a haunted doll. The creepy discovery came 47 years ago. Letta still lives with the man who found him. The hauntings of Letta include things like the doll walking around on its own at night, the owners finding objects around the house that have been moved into odd places. Some people have even seen Letta move right in front of their own eyes, and the owner also reports finding little doll-sized scuff marks around the home as well. It is said that this doll once belonged to someone who passed away while holding it, thus their spirit became trapped inside of the doll. Apparently one day in an interview about Letta, as the interviewer was asking questions about the person who passed, the doll began to move in her lap. Yeah, no thank you. Letta has his own Instagram and Facebook page in case you want to hear more about all of the creepiness surrounding this cursed doll. In our number 1 spot today we have the mask. This metal mask resembles the face of a monkey. It's definitely already a little strange looking, but the story is even more interesting. According to the seller of this item, they explained that they acquired this mask in Thailand, but not before they experienced a supernatural battle where a witch used spells to bind the spirit of a jinn to the mask, trapping it in. Since then, the mask is said to be full of supernatural powers, some of which could bring benefits, but it takes a whole pile of work. This mask is said to have the ability to fend off vampires as well as potentially bring riches to its owner, but it needs some things in return. The entity in the mask needs regular offerings of food and drink, and it also requires the owner to meditate in front of it for 20 minutes 3 times a day. Talk about high maintenance. If a person refuses to do these things while in possession of the mask, it is said that a cruel fate awaits them. I mean, what do you expect when you anger an ancient spirit?
Number 10. The Hands Resist Him. The Hands Resist Him is a painting by Bill Stoneham. It's also known as the Haunted eBay painting, and I can't say that I disagree. The painting is based on a real-life photograph of the artist from around the time he was 5 years old. The painting depicts a young boy and doll in front of a glass door with disembodied hands in the background. A California couple found the painting in an abandoned brewery, but in February 2000, not long after they brought it to their home, they've listed it on eBay with a warning to buyers. It said, "This painting may or may not possess supernatural powers that could impact or change your life." Now, let me just say, if something you're thinking about buying comes with a warning like that, I'd suggest not buying it. The couple claimed their daughter told them that the boy and girl from the painting would fight with each other at night. The ad also mentioned that at one point the boy seemingly exited the picture, which is why they decided to sell. I'm sorry, this just gives me the goosebumps. It sold for $1,025 to Kim Smith, a gallery owner from Michigan. In an interview, she revealed that she's received emails from people who claim they were repulsed or became physically ill by just viewing a photo of the painting. My suggestion, burn it with fire right now. Number 9. The Bassano Vase. Legend has it that this silver vase made in the 15th century was given to a bride on the evening of her wedding near Naples, Italy. Sadly, she'd never make it to the altar as her life was ended that very night with the vase in her hands. From there, the vase was passed down her family line, but anyone who took possession of it is said to have passed away soon thereafter, so the family eventually made the decision to hide the vase. Which sounds like a great idea, but in 1988, the vase resurfaced, supposedly accompanied by a note that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." However, when the Bassano vase was auctioned off for about $2,250, the note had been excluded from the item description, which I feel like was important to include, but whatever. The pharmacist who bought it died within 3 months, more deaths of new owners followed, until finally the curse seemed to go dormant when a desperate family demanded the police take the vase away, and it has not been seen since. Now, wherever it is today, it should stay there and never come out. Number 8. Nightmare Doll. The doll may look like any other, but according to the seller, it's a debuk. A debuk is a term from Jewish folklore that describes a dead person's soul that is stuck in purgatory. Supposedly, it can inhabit an object or the body of a living person. In this case, it's a doll. The seller, who specializes in selling paranormal items that people don't want anymore, says the doll's owner brought it to an antique shop and was told it was a dieback, but didn't know what the word meant. I feel like if you're buying something haunted, you should do your research on it, but you know, maybe that's just me. Soon after, whenever she would open the box it came in or touch the doll, she would suffer from terrifying nightmares of shadow people. This continued for several months until her son took the doll from her to sell it. It sold for $17.49, and I want to know who just ruined their life for $17.49. Number 7. The Bronze Lady. Many people go into Sleepy Hollow in search of its best known spirit, the Headless Horseman. However, they may not be aware of a second local legend which has haunted the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery for over 100 years, the Bronze Lady. She's a bronze statue located in New York's Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. The Bronze Lady was commissioned by the widow of Civil War General Samuel M. Thomas after he died in 1903. The story goes Samuel's widow was unhappy with the statue because its expression seemed gloomy, so sculptor Andrew O'Connor Jr. redid it for her. But instead of just handing over the new head, he called it a monstrosity and shattered it in front of her. Now, much to her dismay, she installed the original figure to watch over her late husband's tomb anyway. And in the following years, nighttime visitors to the cemetery claimed to have heard quiet sobs coming from the Bronze Lady. It was said if you knocked on the door of the general's tomb and looked through the keyhole, you would have a bad dream that night. There was another one where if you slapped her in the face, sat in her lap, and spit in her eye, she would haunt you for the rest of your life. Yeah, I just stay away from there. Number 6. James Dean's car. On September 23rd, 1955, James Dean ran into Sir Alec Guinness at a restaurant and showed off his Porsche 550 Spider. In his autobiography, Sir Alec described the car as sinister, and he told Dean, "Please never get in it. If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." 7 days later, Dean was found dead after crashing the car. Now, the trouble didn't stop there. Surgeon/recreational racer Dr. William F. Esrich rescued some of the Porsche's parts from a junkyard and passed a few to his friend Dr. Troy McHenry. They installed parts in their own cars and then both crashed during a race in October 1956. William survived, but Troy didn't, and whispers of a curse began to spread. The rest of the car went to George Barris, the car customizer. Over the next several years, the Spider supposedly caused a handful of incidents. A garage caught fire while the car was inside, 2 tires blew out while affixed to a different vehicle, and a couple of thieves were injured when trying to steal some of the Spider's remaining parts. George claimed that the car had mysteriously vanished in 1960, and the car has been MIA since. Seems cursed to me though, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near it. Number 5. Baker's wedding dress. In 1854, while visiting her father's company, Anna Baker met and fell in love with one of the steelworkers. Anna kept the romance a secret from her family as she knew her father would prohibit her relationship with one of his employees. This went on for 2 years, and it wasn't long after Anna's boyfriend proposed and she happily accepted. Anna picked out a beautiful wedding dress and the two made plans to marry, but her father found out about the secret relationship and immediately fired Anna's love, threatening him with death if he ever returned. Anna's heart broke and she fell into a deep depression. The only thing she had was the wedding dress. Her house was then turned into a museum with the dress displayed. Now, most of the paranormal activity in the home appears to be centered around the dress. Visitors have witnessed the glass case move while they were in the room, appearing as if someone was trying to get the dress. Others have claimed to see the dress move or have caught glimpses of what appeared to be the dress out of its case floating around. Number 4. Destructive Statue. The destructive statue was auctioned in October 2013. It was made by a man named William who enjoyed making sculptures out of unhardened clay. I'm sorry, but this statue just makes me feel uneasy, and according to the item's description, William made this particular statue on the same day he was crushed to death during a tragic work incident at the brickyard. Which is ironic because the statue has the word future carved into it, but William never really had a future after making it. Too dark. Moving on. A coworker saw that the statue was still at the job site when he arrived the next day, so he took it home with him like any reasonable person would do. While nothing strange happened for a few months, things took a turn when he took it out of storage to display in his den. A few days later, the den felt heavy and uninviting. He began hearing doors slam on their own, only to find them wide open. Decorations that were next to the statue shattered on their own, and at one point he found the statue facing the other side of the wall, even though he had never moved it. To make matters worse, he then saw a dark shadow or mist as he was walking past the den one night. Completely spooked, he begged his friend to sell it for him, who then put it on eBay. It's so funny that he was so scared to deal with it, he's pawning it off to some other poor soul who will unknowingly experience the exact same thing. Number 3. The Conjure Chest. The Conjure, or the Conjured Chest, is a chest of drawers who has taken the lives of about 16 people. As the story goes, an enslaved man named Remus custom made the item for his enslaver. Jeremiah, displeased with Remus's work, beat him to death. In retaliation, Remus's friends then cursed the chest by scattering dried owl blood in its drawers, and let me just say, those are great friends. But the Grahams used the chest and passed it down their family for 140 years, and death or injury came to anyone who stored their apparel inside. In the mid-20th century, Virginia Carey Hudson Cleveland had 2 of her offspring die, and her husband died after being rushed to the hospital for appendicitis. A neighbor also died after an incident involving a weapon, and all have used the chest. So Virginia enlisted the help of her maid, Sallie, to undo the curse. They followed the steps that included curing a dead owl and boiling willow leaves. Sallie said that if she or Virginia then died, it would prove that the curse had been broken, and months later, Sallie did die. When Virginia's daughter inherited the chest, she opted not to use it, which is why she's the smartest person in that family. Number 2. Robert the Doll. Before there was Annabelle, there was Robert, which is even more terrifying. The 40-inch tall nightmare was created by the German toy company Steiff. In Key West, Florida in 1904, the doll was given to 4-year-old Robert Eugene Otto, who went by Gene. Some reports say it was a present from Gene's grandfather, while others suggested the disgruntled maid of the Ottos cursed the doll before giving it to their young son. It's also possible that the maid cursed the doll sometime after Gene's grandfather gave it to him. Either way, this doll was bad news. Robert the Doll, dressed in a sailor suit of Gene, quickly became his owner's evil alter ego. As legend would have it, whenever Gene's parents would find his bedroom furniture upended or his toys mangled, Gene would say, "Robert did it." Gene grew up, became an artist, got married, and then returned to his childhood house. Gene's wife, Anne, wasn't a huge fan of Robert the Doll, shocking, so Gene set up a new area for him in the attic. Passerbys claimed that Robert would switch positions without any help and would watch them from the window while they walked by. People who actually set foot in the house reported hearing footsteps and laughter in the attic. This activity continued after Gene's death in 1970, when the estate, Robert included, passed into the hands of one Myrtle Reuter. And coming in at number 1 is the Devil's Chair. This story goes like this. Lorraine and Ed Warren helped exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. During his exorcisms, this chair would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Witnesses say the final exorcism concluded when the demon fled David's body and entered Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, a man who ended the life of his landlord months later during an argument and claimed it was due to demonic possession. Now, if this sounds familiar, it is. This story is the inspiration for the 3rd Conjuring film. Now, Ghost Adventure star Zach Bagans purchased the chair to be on display in his museum, but he had been forced to shut down his haunted rocking chair exhibit. While Zach and a friend noticed the door to the chair's room slowly creak open all by itself, Zach also said a light focused on the chair went out when a power cord was mysteriously yanked out of the wall. 2 hours later, he says a woman collapsed, began bawling, and asked, "Why is this happening to me?" Shortly thereafter, she fell unconscious, according to Zach, who adds the woman was upstairs directly above the rocking chair exhibit. Later, Zach said 5 of his tour guides throughout the museum started crying uncontrollably. After just a few tours on opening night, the stress was too much for Zach, and it forced him to shut it down altogether for the night. For now, Zach says the haunting rocking chair exhibit is closed until further notice. But in the middle of 2022, YouTubers Sam and Colby, who are paranormal investigators, that I love by the way, were given special permission to not only see or touch the chair, but to sit in it. The results were insane, and they are braver than me.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Death Curse. It is as dramatic as it sounds as well. The Poltergeist movies are at the center of a pretty avid curse theory. From the original lineup, it seems that 4 cast members died in just 6 years, and 6 cast members altogether died. Others narrowly avoided an untimely demise. Most prominently, the trilogy's main actress, the little girl who played Carol Ann, Heather O'Rourke, died unexpectedly aged 12. Her co-star, the girl who played her sister Dana, Dominique June, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend aged just 22. Julian Beck, the actor who played Kane, died at 60 years old. This was before the release of the third installment. And Will Sampson, who portrayed the good spirit Taylor, died following a lung transplant. Richard Lawson, who played Ryan, almost died in a freak plane crash 10 years after the first movie came out. Now, he did survive, but he wasn't sitting in his original booked seat. The person who was did die. Actor Lou Perryman had a very small role in the movies, but was murdered anyway with an axe in his home in 2009. Ugh. Actress Jo Beth Williams did survive the curse, but she did say that she would come home after shooting to spooky things going on in her home. Not what you want. Coming in at number 9, we have Down with Capitalism and the American Dream. Poltergeist on the surface is a spooky film, and the beast is a big bad evil. Sure, but like, actually, is America the real big evil here? Okay, hear me out. Poltergeist was one of the first movies to move the classic haunted house genre to suburbia. No longer is the horror taking place in a gothic house at the edge of town, it's all happening in your average nice home in a lovely tree-lined neighborhood. The kind of house you could buy if you were a slave to the American dream, perhaps. What else can you buy? What else was center at FDR's New Deal? What else was central to the all-American dream? A television set. So a good job gets you a nice house and a nice TV. Okay, so with that in mind, did anyone else pick up on the fact that the dad in Poltergeist sort of hates his job and the mum sort of ribs him for becoming all corporate? He's even reading Reagan's book. Also, is it not the house and the television that attacks the kids? So I'm thinking, is Poltergeist a well-disguised jab at capitalism and the American dream? Like, quite possibly. Coming into number 8, the beast was Reverend Henry Kane. If you have ever seen Poltergeist 2 and 3, you will have seen the freaky, creepy Reverend Kane character. I don't like a reverend in a movie, I really don't, they're always bad news. It seems that actually, Reverend Kane was the human form embodiment of the beast. It seems that after the first Poltergeist, the beast was banished from Carol Ann's life, so took human form in order to gain the trust of the Freelings. Coming into number 7, we have the clowns. Okay, straight up, I am not a fan of clowns. You know who else isn't a fan of clowns? Movie writer Steven Spielberg. That's who. Many people think that Poltergeist has a strong clown vibe and horrifying clown scenes, specifically because old Steve just can't stand them, and they were his best embodiment of evil and horror. The clowns were present again in the 2015 Poltergeist remake, and some people think that this helped spark the 2016 killer clown phase. Great. Speaking of our mate Steven, he has a theory of his very own, which is coming in at number 6. I'm just straight up calling it the Steven Spielberg theory. So a lot of people believe that actually Steven Spielberg directed Poltergeist. Now he's not credited, he placed Tobe Hooper at the helm of the movie, apparently to avoid legal trouble. Spielberg was the writer and co-producer of the movie, but categorically didn't direct it because of a directorial contract that he had with E.T., which also came out in 1982. People think that he directed the movie anyway though, which I guess isn't that scary a theory, unless you're Mr. Spielberg's lawyer. Coming into number 5, we have the theory that Poltergeist is all about a tech addiction. This theory was posted by Snowfru Neverneb on Reddit 3 years ago. Everyone always has the most inventive Reddit names, honestly. Now it all centers around video games and tech being the real ghouls of the 2015 remake. The film opens with a boy playing a violent video game. The house seems to be surrounded by power lines, so already technology and electricity are pretty present themes. The sister in the movie seems to be dependent on her phone, and the mum uses an iPad all the time, and she's even seen crashing into things because she's just too distracted by her tech. The younger kid gets taken in by the TV. Now here the theory says that clowns seem to represent entertainment without any value, like technology. Nature rises up to try and help the kids. We see squirrels trying to scare the boy away from the room of clowns. Nature in the form of a tree breaks a window and further prevents the kid getting attacked by clowns. So basically, nature good, technology bad. Or so the theory goes. Okay, I do find this dubious at number 4, but we've got to make a top 10 list, and sometimes we've got to take some liberties. Coming in to number 4, the ghosts are aliens, because why not? Again, I'm not sure about this, but we're going with it anyway. On Reddit, Twana Cool wrote, in the original script for the very first Poltergeist, there were aliens instead of ghosts. I'm not sure what his fact source is there, but again, we're going with it. They continued by saying, I think the remake is doing a twist by ghosts really being aliens, the chariots of God and ancient aliens kind. The house is actually on an alien artifact and the little girl is a hybrid with superpowers that aliens want. Am I putting more thought into this remake than the people who made the remake? Honestly, probably, but I don't know. Cool. Honestly, I do like the sass at the end. I think this is a bit of a loose goose theory, but I do like the idea of this when applied to the whole tech thing. Like maybe aliens have found a way to communicate with humans using technology. I don't know though, maybe all ghosts are aliens. Why not? Ooh, I really like this one though. At number 3, we have the Super Bowl predicted Heather's death. There is a weird correlation between the 22nd Super Bowl and Poltergeist, and some people think that there is an absolute link between the movie, the Super Bowl, and actress Heather O'Rourke's death. They think that they're related. Are they? We'll find out. This scary theory hinges on the fact that for some really weird reason, even though Poltergeist was released in 1982, there was a poster in Robbie and Carol Ann's bedroom for Super Bowl 22. Now this was set to take place in 1988, 6 years after the movie's release. Really weird. The Super Bowl, by the way, that year ended up taking place in San Diego. Of course, nobody could have known that at the time, it was 6 years in the future. Eerily, scarily, weirdly, freakily, it was actually the year that Poltergeist actress Heather O'Rourke died. But weirder than that, she fell ill on the very day of the 1988 Super Bowl. She began vomiting on the 31st of January and she died the very next day from septic shock. Where did this all take place? San Diego, California. Just like the Super Bowl. Weird. For our penultimate point, I wanted to talk about the theory for the reason behind the Poltergeist curse altogether. So, in at number 2, we have the skeletons. While some people think that the curse of Poltergeist came around because of the movie's demonic connotations, attracting bad spirits and the like, other people think that it was absolutely the use of skeletons as props. Why? Well, let me explain. It seems that director Tobe Hooper used real-life skeletons in the pool water scene with poor Jo Beth Williams, and those skeletons may have been cursed. The decision to use real remains came as allegedly they were cheaper than fake ones, and they looked a lot better too. How he came across these real dead people, and so many of them, well, we just don't know, but it certainly makes the movie scarier. Also, it seems that Jo Beth wasn't even told about the real skeletons. Her reaction in the scene was very real as she realized that she was swimming with dead people. Horrifying. Okay, finally coming into number 1 of our scary poltergeist theories. This is a bit of a conspiracy theory and really worrying. We have Heather was murdered. So we know that actress Heather O'Rourke died under tragic circumstances aged just 12. The official reason for her death was recorded as cardiac arrest as a result of septic shock, but some people think that the circumstances surrounding her death were extremely suspicious, and beyond that, there are some very dark theories out there. One of them is that the young poltergeist actress was a victim of abuse. Sensationally, it seems that an entertainment lawyer claimed that Heather was heavily assaulted by Hollywood bosses. The story broke from a blog post on crazydaysandnights.net, and it was an anonymous tip-off from someone in the industry. They wrote, I quote, "Back in the mid-80s, it was a peak time for child molesting in Hollywood. There was no internet. There were very few mobile phones. Children came to the set where they were left alone by their parents. For the next 8 hours, they were subjected to every kind of horrible thing you can imagine. Drugs were commonplace. They were used to try and get the kids to not be so hysterical when being assaulted." It's honestly a really horrifying read, and the story goes on to discuss a 12-year-old girl who was a big star at the time being molested at a studio and then causing chaos when she fell ill. Now the story seems to insinuate that she was sexually abused. The blog doesn't actually mention Heather by name, but from the setting of the story and all of the detail included, it seems to indicate that it was her, and actually she died as a result of the injury she got whilst being abused. While this does seem pretty inflammatory and certainly would have been if mentioned at the time, we do now know that Hollywood wasn't a great place in the 1980s and that, yeah, a lot of children and women were abused mentally, if not physically. Was Heather O'Rourke another victim of Hollywood? That really is the question.
At number 10. The first warning sign that your house is haunted is if you see your pets doing this.
What is it, girl?
If this happens to you, you need to get the hell out of your house right now. Don't try to be that hero that goes around investigating every corner of your house, because you might stumble across an angry poltergeist like this poor guy did. Maybe if he cleaned up his house, the poltergeist wouldn't be so angry. The world's creepiest office brings us to number 9. There's nothing scarier than having to go to your office on a weekend. No one is there and all of the rooms are dark, but you always manage to hear something scary lurking around the corner. Well, in this next clip, security cameras captured a lot of poltergeist activity. And let's just say the cleaners aren't going to be happy Monday morning when they have to clean up all of this mess. Take a look at this. Moving into number 8, we have a family who is being tormented by a poltergeist. The family said that they've been haunted by this evil spirit for months without it letting up. They actually called Ed and Lorraine Warren to cleanse their house to hopefully get rid of this damn thing.
The little girl is trying to do her homework, but you can see that the chair keeps sliding backwards.
You're holding it down, aren't you? It's got that much strength to it.
Now, if you watch, you can see the little girl's legs are up on the rungs of the chair.
Is this real life right now? Why is the mother and daughter so freaking calm? She's at the kitchen table trying to do her homework, but a supernatural force is literally moving her chair and she just keeps on writing. So why is the mother okay with this? I'd grab my wife, my kids, and wallet and I'd go look for the closest hotel. There's no way in hell I would be staying in that house. I mean, I value my life way too much. Up next, number 7, we have an angry school poltergeist. During a small teaching lesson, a camera was set up for evaluation purposes, but they didn't expect to capture this.
What we're going to do, we need to... I tell you what, guys, let's just go out for a minute.
You can tell that the teacher is trying so hard to remain calm, but on the inside, he's probably freaking the hell out. The camera was left behind, and it captured even more crazy footage. I don't know if these videos are real or not. All I know is I'm not sure if I can handle all this. I'm totally freaking out. A restaurant poltergeist creeps us onto this list at number 6. I think it's safe to say that this poltergeist did not like his food or service at this restaurant. But that's still not a good enough excuse to throw your plate like that. I mean, have some manners. But in all seriousness, what is the name of this restaurant? Because I definitely want to avoid eating there, especially if it has bad food and angry poltergeist activity. An angry poltergeist chef breaks into this list at number 5. The most dangerous room for you to have a poltergeist in is definitely in the kitchen. Things can get pretty dangerous. There are just so many sharp objects that could be thrown around. Okay, what the heck? Was there a bomb in that drawer? I feel like this will be Gordon Ramsay when he passes away. He's gonna haunt the kitchens of the people who gave him bad food reviews. Number 4, we have an angry ghost attacking a woman. This footage was taken from a hotel in Malaysia, and I think it's safe to say that this poor woman probably saw better days. If you thought that was intense, things go bad to worst real fast. This is one angry ghost. I mean, what would you guys do in this situation? I would probably run like hell and I would hope for the best. And I think I would soak myself in holy water for about 48 hours while a priest is blessing my hotel room. Okay, moving on to this next one. I literally don't know what the hell is going on in this video. Usually when I'm watching these clips, I'm a little bit suspicious and I try to figure out if these clips are fake, but I just can't wrap my head around this next clip. I mean, take a look for yourself. There's no way that someone was sitting crunched over in the corner with a string, tipping over the couch. This is legit poltergeist footage. I believe this could be real. It's plausible. This person should put their couch out on garbage day and move ASAP. Man dragged by ghost slides onto our list at number 2. Here's a clip of a man walking down a creepy hallway when all of a sudden he gets attacked by a large black mass who desperately wants to drag him away. Is anyone else completely freaked out, or am I the only one here? I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm gonna sleep with some lights on tonight. Topping this list, and at number 1, we have a poltergeist attacking a boy. I'll be the first one to admit that this video scared the out of me. I'm usually pretty skeptical when it comes to these sort of videos, like I always tell you guys, but honestly, this clip looks way too real. Here we have a young boy sitting on a chair when out of nowhere, a supernatural force pushes him backwards. His mother desperately reaches out for her son, but the ghost wasn't finished yet. Either this boy is faking it, and you got dance moves like Michael Jackson, or they have a very angry poltergeist on their hand.